Welcome to today's tutorial. We are going to talk or learn about states and props in React Redux. So in the previous two videos, we talked about presentational component and container components. Where presentational component, we talked about presenting data. It's a stateless component. And then during when we're speaking about container component, we said it provides data or it's a stateful component. In today's tutorial, I will be combining about states and props at the same time so that the concepts or the difference between each and the similarities can be or somebody can get to differentiate between them. You don't need to go to two videos or check on two videos. So states and props all controls data flow in React. Uh, they all render components with dynamic data. We know that data changes. Probably today we may be rendering a list of items or a list of books in our library. If someone else renders or had more books in our library, that means we have to render a new data. That's a dynamic data that changes. It's not a static data like we have two books in our library today. We may need to sometime other may be lost, others may be deleted. So that's a dynamic data. Um, so in relation or how can I state this in terms of presentational or container component is that um, when we say a presentational component presents data or it is a stateless data, you will come and look and find out in this video that majorly in presentational components we pass props, and in container component we pass state. Why? Container components are stateful. They control the state, how things work. That's actually what state does. Um, Majorly, we will be. This video may look theoretical, but I just want us to get the theory part of it, so that in later we will be doing a CRUD application, and we will be looking more on the practical or in practical perspective. So, in short, a state is a limited or private to a component and can only be passed to another component as props. They can be changed inside that component. So you can take your state to a presentational component or a functional component and then or a child component and try to change that state in your child. That doesn't happen. It just happens in its in the private or the component that it is defined. And also the second point says the same. They can only be changed inside the component, that component that it is defined. Another thing is a state component or a state of a component becomes the props of a child. We will be looking on this. We also use the states and props when we were discussing about presentational and container components. But I will be using the same. I will be using the same uh, application or the same code that I used in container and presentational component for us to learn about the states and the props. So, what are props? Props are static values. I don't say like it's actually like you pass state, you pass data from state, you pass it to a child component. That's like there's there's a relationship between the two. Also, they are the keys of child component and are passed to child component through parent component. That's what we mentioned earlier, that state becomes props of a child component, and they cannot be changed inside a child component. They are immutable. Like when you have said the data that has come here is A, or books are 5. That's final. You can't change that it's 6. So probably sorry. Let me actually I've opened this. This was our previous code that we had created earlier, where we were speaking about the container component, and then this symbol component was the presentational component. As I've mentioned that in our symbol component we pass props, and then from our container components we can set our state. So for instance, we have set a state here to be the header and a paragraph, where we are getting started with React. That's the header, and the paragraph is um, the paragraph is actually this is web is created with simple React Redux, and then we can pass this data to our functional or our child component through uh, props, like true props. So we may pass the header and we pass a paragraph here. So I want to run this application. 1 minute. So okay. So I want just to run this application. Okay. Just 1 minute to run this application here. So as you can see, we had previously written uh, two child components here. So for this case, so we have these two child. So let's pass. I just want us to pass like only the header as a prop for our second child. So when we save this, it refreshes automatically. So we just get getting state, like getting started with. We have not passed the we have not passed the body or the paragraph. So for instance, if for instance, if I say if I want to check that we actually have our, like, what is our state here. So let's say state in parent. So this dot state. Sorry for that. So we will have this state, like we will have the header and the paragraph being printed in our console. I don't know if I'm making some sense, but and then the data, as you can see from the child component, we are passing props. If we try to print like to print props, like the properties that are passed to the child, what you'll notice here is that we have two child components. One takes props for the header and the other one takes the props for paragraph. As you can see, in this container component, we have header and paragraph as state. But when we pass it to our child component, it becomes props. That's the reason why I said the state of a container component, or a state, or for a like a state for component becomes the props for its child. So this will print two instance. Why? Because we're actually using two, like we are taking two components here, two child components. You will notice that the first instance will print for us the header and the paragraph. The second one will print for us the only header. Let's take a look at it here. So as you can see, the state, or let me even refresh so that. So as you can see, the state in the parent we get, it's the header and the paragraph. But we have passed these two props of the child, but we have actually passed the only for the first item, we have passed the header and the paragraph as props. But in the second instance, you have passed only the header. So you can actually more children's components are more reusable. You can reuse them in any other place, and you can pass whatever props you want to pass from the parent component. It doesn't matter. For instance, you can have a nav bar, and then in our nav bar, we want to have the same nav bar like the designs that we have to be reflected when someone is logged in and even when someone is logged out. So what determines is the props that we pass in those navbar. We can check whether a person is logged in, and then we pass props that will have the logout profile and blah blah. But when someone is not logged in, we pass props that will have the login and the sign up pattern. So that's how state and props work in React. This was more theoretical. This was more like introduction to props and states. We'll also come to speak about constructor. And a constructor, that's like if you don't want to initialize a state with if you don't want to initialize a state with some items, then you don't need even a constructor. And also, if you don't want to bind some methods, like there is a way when you create a method and then you want to bind to this class. So that's the need for constructor. Also, you need this method called super, and then pass props to the constructor, so that in any other place you don't define, like you don't, like you when you come and say this dot props, you get undefined. If you don't mostly use the constructor and you want to get this dot props, it becomes not easy to get it. You can get undefined, which will may cause a lot of bugs. Also, in the constructor, this is the place where you can actually do this dot state, like to define this dot state. But in other places, or like this like component did mount, for that case you will do this dot set state. So that's just it. By the way, we will be looking, so in the next tutorial or in the next video, we are going to speak about setting states. How do we set state? How do we change? Maybe we decided that our initial state, the header is blank. How do we set state to reflect what we had in the header, which is getting started with React? Please, I welcome you to the next video. As we proceed, I will be like, if you have any suggestions, please let me know. Thank you.